Waiting. Still waiting. Still waiting.
It says on air for me.
Does it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really? See, it says starting event for me. That's weird. All right. You know what? I'm going to take a risk. All right, that's weird. I got stuck in a starting event loop, and it wouldn't kick me out of it. So as long as the problems happen to me, there's no problem at all.
All right.
I get more worried if the problems happen to you. So knock on MDF desk board, real wood. Let's hope nothing else happens. Hi, everyone out there on the internet. My name is Kevin Griffin. Welcome to the Swift Kick Show. I see a couple people filing into the room right now. As you're coming in, jump over to our chat and tell us where you're from.
Don't be shy.
I see a lot of faces out there, so someone say hi. Everyone, they're very reluctant to type into the chat.
I mean, it says right in the chat, it says, don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Start chatting. All right. We got another Kevin. Hi, Kevin from Austin, Texas. My good friend Sean lives in Austin. One of my fellow Two Frugal Dudes, which is a podcast I have on the side. All right. Well, we'll let the chat for a moment. I'll go and run through some introduction material, and then we'll get to the real reason everyone's here, and that's to see Mr. David Neal. David, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I am well. Hopefully no more issues. Let's see how this goes. All right, I'm going to bring up some slides. We'll hit start. Again, welcome everyone to the Swift Kick Show. Once again, my name is Kevin Griffin. I'm the owner of SwiftKick. We are a software training and consulting company based out of Chesapeake, Virginia. I have grown up in the community, working with developers, going to user groups, conferences, doing online events like this, lots of blogging and lots of articles. I am very passionate about giving back to the community that has helped me so much. And it's been an opportunity for me to meet fantastic people like Mr. David Neal to my side here. So the Swift Kick Show is an opportunity for me to give back and bring extremely smart people like David on the air so he can talk about things that he's most passionate about. We're on the social media, if you do that sort of thing. Specifically, we do a lot of work on Twitter at Team SwiftKick. We also have a very active YouTube channel, which we have an official URL now. We finally hit that threshold where we could get a real URL and not a random GUID that YouTube created for us. I'll drop that in the chat once we get started. We have some other awesome speakers coming up in the next month or so. David, these names should look familiar to you because you and I were just at Revolution Conf together last week.
Yep.
And I've known David for a very long time. I think this was your second Revolution Conf, wasn't it?
Yes.
Second. All right. Because you came to the first one and then last week was the third one. We have two speakers from Revolution Conf that will be joining us. Miss Jenna Carlton and Mr. Kyle Welch, both fantastic speakers. Not quite sure what they're going to talk on yet. We're still determining that. But set your calendars, June 13th and June 27th. We'll be back right here. And because you're already on the list, you'll get email notifications about these when they come up. But first things first, we want to talk about our special guest, Mr. David Neal, and he's going to do his presentation here in a moment on leadership for the reluctant leader. And I've seen probably versions of this talk in the past, and I've always been impressed. Hopefully, David will not make us cry like he has in some of his previous keynotes. But we'll we'll keep our fingers crossed. But David, before we get started, I just want to ask a couple questions to you because if our listeners or anyone who watches this in the future, if they've never, how could this ever happen? If they have never heard of Mr. David Neal, we need to tell them a little bit about you. So number one, David, tell us who you work for and what do you do here?
Well, I work for Joyent, based in San Francisco. Joyent has a cloud platform called Triton, and I do the JavaScripts. So I work with Node and Happy on a daily basis, building APIs, GraphQL, and have started to dabble with some front end things like Vue. And yeah, so you will know me on Twitter because I complain about JavaScript quite a bit. We all love to bash on JavaScript. Whether I actually really like the language, but I like to have fun with it.
Awesome. Now let's take a trip in the Wayback Machine, back before David Neal was the David Neal that we see here. Tell us your origin story. How did you get into software development? What is the series of events that have led us to today?
Yeah, so back when I was still wearing my training beard, let's see, I got started in software development, and I'll tell a little bit about this story in my talk, but I got into it back in the 90s, first with Pascal and then Basic and then Visual Basic, and then classic ASPs. By the end of the 90s, I was doing web development full time using classic ASP, and I was planning to jump ship and go to Java, and that's when I went to the Microsoft PDC in 2000, where they announced .NET and C#, and they gave everyone at the conference this little book called Presenting C#, and I took that and like, wow, this is what I want to do. And so for many, many years, .NET and ASP.NET specifically paid the bills, and I geeked out a lot about SQL Server. And somewhere around 5 years ago, I started really taking JavaScript more seriously and started playing around with Node, and kind of fell in love with Node, and built some Electron applications for desktop as well as Node web apps. And now I just complain about JavaScript.
Because it's the gift that keeps on giving. There's
It
always
is.
something to complain about, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Well, awesome. Outside of tech, though, do you have any other hobbies?
Absolutely. So I've been a musician for a long time. So I play guitar and bass and dabble with a few other instruments, but I play guitar on a regular basis. I've been doing that. I used to live in Nashville, where I had the opportunity of playing with quite a few folks. It was a whole lot of fun. And then in recent years, I've picked up a hobby of drawing. I started drawing about 3.5 years ago. I did so to help make my presentations a little more engaging and fun. And it turned into, I discovered that I absolutely love to do it and couldn't stop.
Fantastic. So you've already talked to us a little bit about your tech stack of choice. So your JavaScript, all the things, Node, different client-side libraries. I always like to ask the speaker, outside of, I guess, Node in this case, is there any particular technology you see on the horizon that you're getting really excited about, whether or not you're learning it or that you want to learn it?
Well, the latest thing that I've started learning is GraphQL, and I think there's quite a few advantages that I've seen over REST, and I think it's exciting. It's a query language. It has a number of benefits, such as reducing the number of round trips that you typically have to make with a traditional REST API. You can specify from the client exactly which fields you care about, so you get less data across the wire. It's just a whole lot more efficient and usable interface for doing that communication for mobile apps and spa type, front ends. So that's new stuff. Looking forward beyond that, I guess I'm just so excited about JavaScript and the continuing evolution of the language and the new things that they're adding and the new things that are coming out in Node. It continues to improve. It's a great ecosystem.
Well, fantastic. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time asking you silly questions. So let's go ahead and move on. And David, I'll let you go ahead and share your screen and take it from here.
All right.
All right. And folks out there in the audience, feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go through. We're not going to answer questions as we move along, but we'll have an extended Q&A at the end of the presentation. All right, David, it is all yours.
All right. Can you see my slides?
Yes, sir.
Cool. All right. So this is my talk, Guide to Leadership for the Reluctant Leader. And hey, y'all, how are you doing? I live in the South, so I speak fluent redneck. If you have any trouble understanding me, then it's because of my spectacular educational background, living in the deep South. I do poke fun at myself for the way that I talk, and it seems like for some folks in other parts of the country and other parts of the world, they seem to find it charming that I speak the way that I do. But here we are. So first thing I want to tell you is that we at my previous company, we had this thing about punching bears. It's how to be awesome, right? It's we would use this phrase, get out there and punch some bears today. It meant, we really want to tackle the hard problems. We wanted to be disruptive in our industry. We wanted to, take on the bigger folks and really try to do the hard things. But in real life, punching bears is probably not such a great idea. It probably will just upset the bear and cause him to maul you even worse than before. Now, this has nothing to do with my presentation on leadership. I just thought you might like some free advice. So I'm in technology, and I assume that most of you are also in technology, and you're learning new things all the time through webinars and through blog posts and, watching online courses and things like that to sharpen your skills. And, that can be a really exciting thing, especially if you're in an environment where you're encouraged to grow. But for some of us, learning new technology and trying to keep up with all the latest trends can be really, really, something that causes a lot of anxiety. How am I going to learn all this new stuff, and how am I going to convince my boss to let me use any of these things? And it can be a hard challenge. And here I am with another webinar, to add to your pile of things. And we could talk about technology and where we see things going in the next 5 years, but that could be probably as accurate as the weather forecast. And IoT is a really hot topic. We could talk about how we should be connecting everything in our houses to the cloud and reaping the benefits of having everything connected and taking advantage of deep learning, right? Or my favorite topic, we could talk about JavaScript. It's there's new frameworks every day. Every 5 minutes a new JavaScript framework is born, and you might as well just forget everything that you thought you knew and adopt this latest thing that just that everybody's jumping on. But what I'm here to talk about is, I believe that regardless of the technology that you know, regardless of the job title that you currently have, and regardless of how much experience you have an amazing opportunity and potential to impact your workplace and your community, your family, and beyond in powerful and meaningful ways. And before we dive in, I want to share with you a story from early in my career about how I began to wrestle with this idea of leadership. So when I got started, as mentioned earlier in the talk, is IT for me was a bit of operations, a bit of network admin, and a little bit of programming, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the opportunity to solve problems, and I couldn't believe that I got paid to play around with hardware and build servers and connect people to, help train people on how to use, different software and solve problems. It was a whole lot of fun. But then a funny thing happened. Somewhere along the way, the management, above me saw my potential and thought, you know what, well, let's promote David to a management position. And I didn't know what to do with that. All I wanted to do was write code. And I'm naturally an introvert. Leaving my desk and going and talking to people about their jobs and what they were working on was not even remotely in my nature. I didn't know how to deal with managing other folks and managing projects. And I resented the position. I didn't want to do those things. I did the bare minimum to get by. And within 18 months or so, I took a straight programming job, making less money. And this cycle of promotion to management, despair, and changing jobs repeated itself several times early in my career. And my wife once asked me, what do you have against making more money? Well, that's just wasn't for me. And you see, I don't know about you, but for me, the ideal job consisted of give me the fastest, most powerful computer at my disposal, give me a virtually unlimited supply of caffeinated beverages, and then stand back and let me sling some code. Some of you know what I'm talking about. It wasn't until years later and maybe some mentoring and maybe a little bit of maturity that I began to realize that my attitude towards facets of my job outside of just fingers to the keyboard and writing code needed an attitude adjustment. I needed to consider, what are the other things, that affect my career and affect, the people that are around me that I need to be better at. And this led me to an understanding of leadership. I've had to come to terms with what it means to be a leader. And I'm hoping that, through this short webinar, I can set you on a path of a better understanding. Now, you may be thinking like what I used to think, that leadership is only for management. And for the longest time, I didn't want to have anything to do with being a manager or being in management. But leadership is not equal with management. Leadership is a set, sets of skills and capabilities and things that anyone can learn. It's there's certainly an aspects of leadership that are needed for someone who's in management, but it's not to say that anyone, regardless of where they are in the org chart, can be a leader in their department or in their team, or that are having influence on other folks throughout the company. So I'm here to tell you that leadership is for all y'all. And if you're not familiar with the term all y'all, let me explain what that means in the South. It's, you have you, which is one person. You have y'all, which usually refers to 2 to 5 people you're addressing, and then all y'all means everyone. There are qualities and skills that I believe being a leader that we all need to learn. Now, a couple of years ago, there was a group of us at my previous company that went through a leadership training program at the Scarlet Leadership Institute in near Nashville, Tennessee. And our group was named the Emerging Leaders. But every time I saw emerging leaders, I thought the word emerging looked kind of like Ermagerd. And that's, secretly what I called our group. Every 6 weeks or so, we would meet at an offsite facility and learn a core leadership skill, things like team dynamics and communication, resolving conflict, and many others. I highly, highly recommend talking to your organization about sending some folks to a leadership program such as this, if you can find it. To give you an example, on one occasion of our training, we learned some skills around negotiation, and we role played. We broke up into pairs of teams, and we started to learn about some negotiation skills. We were given in the form of what looked like legal documents. Each team had some information about what their goals were for the negotiations, what information they knew about the other teams that they were going up against, and each round of this role playing taught us specific skills and tactics for negotiation. We learned things like the importance of doing research and knowing not only what is the best outcome for your own organization, but also as much reconnaissance as you could do on the other team or other group of folks that you're going to be going up against. We learned about BATNA, which is the best alternative negotiated agreement. This is how this is like the bare minimum of a negotiated agreement that you can accept. And if anything is below what your BATNA is, it's a good time to walk away from that deal. And then there's this idea of anchoring your position in the negotiation. So in any negotiation, the first person or the first group to make an offer or to propose an agreement, that initial proposal becomes the anchor for the rest of the discussion. So it's a powerful thing that if you can be the first, you can anchor a negotiation deal in terms that are in your favor, if you can be the first to do that. And at the end of the day, at the end of our training that day, our instructor cautioned us that the things that we had learned about negotiation were extremely powerful, and to use our new skills for good and not for evil. Well, sure. Well, a couple of months later, I found myself in the market for a new vehicle, and I did my research. I knew what I wanted. I understood the options that were available, and I knew what to expect from my adversary. And I knew that I could walk away from a deal that wasn't better than my BATNA, my best alternative to a negotiated agreement. An opportunity came up the day that I got a cavity filled. I found a truck at a dealership that was close to my dentist, and I thought, well, I'll kill two birds with one stone. After I go to the dentist, I'll go check out this truck. And when I got to the dealership, it didn't take long for one of their sharks to find me. I don't think I'd stepped out of my car yet before one of them was already ready to pounce and ask me how I was doing. And this dealership guy, he says, what brings you in today? And I said, well, I just went to the dentist, and now I'm here to check out one of your trucks that I saw you listed on your website. And he said, buddy, research says that there's two things that people hate doing the most: going to the dentist and shopping for a car. You're doing both in the same day. You must be tough. Indeed, I am. And when we got to his office, after looking at this truck, he made the mistake of letting me make the first strike. Now, I anchored the deal with a number that I was confident, based on my research, was close to their bottom line as to what they would accept as a price for that vehicle. And I had a whole lot more firepower from my training at my disposal. And after the dust had settled, I owned the exact truck that I wanted at a really awesome price. I knew without a doubt that I could turn around and sell this truck and make at least $2,000. Having negotiation as skill and being able to use that to your advantage, it's an incredible feeling. And negotiation is one of many leadership skills that you definitely need in your life, and not just for the workplace, but using it in the workplace. Being able to negotiate on behalf of your team or behalf of your organization to, get things, changed, or, get things better for the people that you work with. That's an invaluable skill to have. Now, one of the books that my leadership emerging leaders group went through as part of this process was The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni. In this book, he describes 3 virtues that every leader, or essentially every great employee, must possess. This book can not only help you to identify and hire the very best employees, but if you allow it to, it can get you thinking about ways that you can improve yourself in the areas that may be lacking. And I found it an awesome, insightful book that helped me to think about, how am I measuring up to these virtues that make up the ideal team player. So the first of these virtues is humility, and being humble is characterized by, essentially thinking more about your team than yourself, being able to eagerly share the credit with those that you work with, and caring more about others than, your own, wanting the best for everyone involved. But humility has this spectrum. On one end, we have someone who's characterized as being arrogant and self-centered. They, want to do everything that they're politicians who are causing division and resentment. On the other end of the spectrum, you have someone who almost appears to be humble, but can be just as damaging to a team. They discredit their own talents and value to the team. And worst of all is that they won't point out problems when they see them. Now, I personally identified with this for many years in my career. I was, I was on this end of the spectrum where I felt like that my opinions didn't matter, and that when I saw an issue, it's like, well, nobody's going to listen to me anyway. One of my favorite authors, C.S. Lewis, had this to say about humility. The heart of being humble is unselfish motivations for your team and your customers. When you truly want the best outcome for everyone around you, you are acting with humility. The second virtue is hungry. Unfortunately, not for food. If that were the case, I would pass with flying colors, because I likes to eat. But hungry in this case is being characterized by passion and taking ownership of work. And again, this is a spectrum of behavior. On one end, you have someone whose life is completely dominated by their work to the detriment of themselves and everyone around them. And on the other end of the spectrum, you got someone who has no motivation and no passion, and they do the bare minimum to get by. Again, I kind of fell on this side of the spectrum for much of my early career. I love to learn. I love to do things, but I just, I have to admit, sometimes I would do the bare minimum to get by. What we want to strive for is a balance of passion and diligence that's manageable and sustainable, that's not going to harm anyone around us, and that we're continuing to push ourselves to grow, but not at the detriment of our workplace or our family. And then the third virtue in this book is smarts. Not intelligence, but having common sense regarding people. Some you may have heard of, like emotional IQ, or some of those other kind of facets are having empathy. So smart in this regard is characterized by being engaged and being an active listener and asking good questions, being sensitive of how your words and your actions affect others, and having empathy for your coworkers and your customers. And to sum up, it's really all about having respect for people. Now, here's any professional, presentation has, there's this unwritten rule that you got to have a Venn diagram, right? So here's a Venn diagram of those three virtues, just because Venn diagrams don't, we all love them, right? So humility and passion, diligence, empathy, sensitivity, respect for people, all these things are choices that you can strive to make, that you can develop in your life. And by doing so, you not only become an indispensable employee, but you can go on to inspire others to want what you have, to want those virtues, and to be more like hungry, humble, and smart. And by doing so, you become a leader. Did you know that different people have different personalities? I know, right? It's a real shocker. Different people have different behaviors. They have different ways of seeing the world, how they process information, how they make decisions, and how they respond to conflict. Unfortunately, our industry tends to attract people with, let's say, suboptimal people skills. We can be quite productive and get, quite far in our careers on just our technical skills alone. Most of us, including myself, are much more comfortable talking to our computers than we are with interacting with totally unpredictable, irrational, emotional people, all that human interaction stuff. Well, another valuable tool that you can learn is how to understand other people's personalities and how, what motivates people and some of their behaviors. And there are lots of tools out there for this that can help you to understand and gain insight, not only into other people, but also yourself, which can be really enlightening. My favorite so far is DISC, the DISC Behavior Assessment Tool. DISC stands for these words: dominance, influence, compliance, and steadiness. And I have no idea what those definitions of those things are. I don't think it's really that important. But when you go through something like this, it helps to identify, how you fall and how other people fall on the spectrum of being outgoing or reserved, or being more task oriented or more people focused. These personality traits can give you insight into behaviors, such as how people like to receive and process and communicate information. It's a really, really fantastic tool. For example, some people are really deep thinkers and they don't like surprises. So going into a meeting and announcing some big change and then immediately expecting to get their input is not how they like to operate. They need time to process new information before they can formulate an opinion and give feedback. And usually that feedback is really thoughtful and well discerned. So you absolutely need people who are active go-getters and take charge and make quick decisions, but you also need people to help balance out that spectrum, who can think deeply about problems and keep your gung-ho action-oriented people grounded. Understanding behavior and personalities can go a long way to helping you empathize with your coworkers. And by doing so, it helps you to also influence, because you now know how best to communicate with them, and you can tailor communications to their personality. And a better understanding of yourself and your own behavior and your own communication style can help you develop strategies for your workplace. Just being able to articulate to your manager things like, this is the best way that you can communicate with me, can make a huge difference. Learning how other people process information, how they communicate, and how they respond to conflict puts you in an amazing position of influence and leadership. What's your greatest weakness? Don't you just love that question? You'll be rocking along in a job interview or a performance review, and the question is going to come up. And you've thought about it ahead of time. You try to come up with something really clever, like, my greatest weakness is I work too hard. I just can't help it. I have to get things done on time or it'll just kill me. It's a curse, I suppose. Well, there's this another powerful tool out there called the Strengths Finder. In this book, and the assessment that comes along with it is a result of years of study and thousands, tens of thousands of surveys that were done by Gallup Research. Each one of you has unique talents, knowledge, and skills. And the Strengths Finder is designed to help you discover your top 5 gifts and help you to maximize those gifts. Based on their research and according to what they have understood about focusing on weaknesses versus strengths, is that focusing a lot of time on your weaknesses only leads to mediocrity at best. When you're not able to use your strengths at work and really focus on them, chances are you're not going to enjoy going to work. You're going to dread it. You're going to, not want to get up out of bed in the morning. You're going to have more negative interactions with your coworkers. You'll achieve less, and you'll have fewer, creative moments when you're really excited about the things that you're doing. On the other hand, focusing on your top 5 strengths will have far greater impact. When you're in an environment where you're empowered to use your strengths, you will be 100% more engaged and more excited about the work that you're doing and have those really awesome creative moments where you are excited and love the work that you're doing. Again, this is an incredible tool that you and your team can use together to unlock your potential, to see how your strengths among you can complement each other. Let's talk about multitasking. Our culture seems to be fixated on multitasking. We put it on our job descriptions, must be a good multitasker. We put it on our resumes. The truth is, none of us are as good at multitasking as we think we are. When you look at a highway, and our industry talks a lot about 100% utilization. We can't have any wasted time. Let me ask you the rhetorical question. What's a highway and 100% utilization? Well, it's a parking lot. And it's not just my opinion, it's math. It's true for traffic, it's true for fluid dynamics, electricity, and it's true for people. When you go to the circus and you see this fool get into a cage with a lion, and you think, what is this idiot doing? He's going to get mauled to death. And it's kind of impressive that he doesn't get killed. But, the whip is cool, but what's up with that chair? Turns out the whip is for the audience. The whip does nothing for the lion. The chair, however, is in that lion's face. And the lions have incredible powers of focus. That's what helps them in the wild to be predators. And when you put those 4 legs of a chair in a lion's face, he can't decide which of those 4 legs he needs to focus on or to worry about. And he essentially becomes paralyzed with indecision. Now, we are much the same way. When we have too many tasks on our plate, our brains become overloaded and overwhelmed. We think we can switch from task to task, but our brains don't work that way. We can't stop thinking about those other problems and those other things. Those other things haunt us even in our sleep. How many times have you woke up with the revelation of a solution to a problem? Our subconscious doesn't stop thinking about those problems that we're trying to solve. And it may sound counterintuitive, but do everything in your power to limit the work that you are expected to be working on at one time. I guarantee you'll get more work done and do it faster than trying to juggle too many things at once. I submit to you that there are 3 inevitable things in life. There's death, taxes, and PowerPoint. Sooner or later, it's going to happen, whether it's speaking to your team or your company, a wedding or a meetup. or maybe even a conference in your future, you'll have to stand in front of a group of people, some of them strangers, perhaps, and present some information. In 2011, I finally got up the courage to give my first talk at a user group, and I stank. I was terrible. But a funny thing happened. I had people thank me for sharing. I had people tell me that I did a great job, even though I was sure that I was the worst speaker in speaker history. And it took a while for it to sink in, but I learned a really valuable lesson about the power of community. There are people out there who are just really awesome at being human, who will look past your mistakes, who will see good and potential that is in you, and will encourage you to not give up. Because when you do hard stuff and you share your experiences with other people, everyone benefits. And when I gave my first talk, people didn't remember how I fumbled around with some, demo issue. They remember me, and they remember that in some small way, perhaps, I helped them with their life or their career. And a couple of years ago, I had the privilege of giving a keynote at Music City Code, and I shared the same story about how I got started. I had more than one person come up to me after the keynote and say, I remember when you gave your first talk. I was there. And you're right. You were terrible. Thank you. And you might be thinking to yourself, I understand being asked to speak or forced to speak, but why would I volunteer to speak? So let me tell you, sharing some information and having someone be inspired to go and actually do that thing that you're talking about, to want to try it, or to tell you sometime later that they went and did it, that is one of the most rare and precious rewards I have ever experienced. Public speaking is an amazing skill that you can learn that will set you apart and open up doors and opportunities and launch you ahead as a leader and influencer in your company and community. I could go on and on about the benefits of public speaking, of all the opportunities that it's opened up for me and things that I've been able to do from after becoming a public speaker. But I encourage you that this is a really key leadership skill. Have you heard of the Dilbert principle? The most ineffective workers are systematically promoted to the place where they can do the least damage. Management. Yep. Early in my career, I worked under a manager who exemplified this Dilbert principle. I really didn't like the man, personally or professionally, and his incompetence was legendary. He was notoriously bad. Mistakes were named after him, and yet he still continued to rise in rank and responsibilities. And a lot of the work I was required to do under his direction made no sense at all and was of no value to anyone. As an example, I was asked to create this huge binder of documentation for every method and every stored procedure in the code that we were creating. And no one was ever going to read this, ever. Meaningless and pointless work is soul crushing. And I toughed it out for more than a year, and I tried every way possible that I could find to get out from under him, but with no hope of relief in sight, I found another job. And I said to myself, life is too short to work somewhere that stinks. And I started living by this philosophy. I offered it as advice to other developers and other people in IT when I heard them complaining about their jobs. You see, in technology, we are very privileged that we are in such high demand that we have the luxury of being able to change jobs and choose where we work. That's not the case in every profession. The problem is this idea began to pollute my perspective. And when things started to go sour, I would think, oh, great, here we go again. It's time to start looking for a new job. Years later, I was in a similar situation. I was unhappy. I started interviewing at other companies, and there was an attractive job offer on the table. And I was trying to decide whether or not I should accept. And that's when my wife asked me two questions that stopped me in my tracks. She asked, have you done everything that you can do? And if you left now, would you have any regrets? I declined the job offer, and I took ownership of the situation, and I committed to doing everything in my power to make my team successful. In the end, I left that job 1 year later, but I left having no regrets and very proud of the work that we had accomplished. It had been one of the most productive and prolific years of my career. Now, sure, there can be toxic environments, there can be career limiting situations, and there can be amazing opportunities that come along that justify changing jobs. But for anything else, I've got a new mindset. Life is too short to let things stay the way they are. We've all heard the phrase, that's not my job. Well, I've learned that taking ownership and responsibility is always the right thing to do, and it has far-reaching effects. I've learned it's okay to be honest with your management and with leadership to say, is there anything I can do to help? It's always the right time to do the right thing. And in doing so, you become a leader in the eyes of those around you. Every now and again, good folks leave, really good ones. Regardless of the circumstances, we let them know how much we appreciate them, and their contributions and how much they will be missed. Some time ago, it struck me, why can't we express our appreciation all the time? Why do we have to wait until someone is leaving before we let them know what kind of impact they've made and how awesome they are? Maybe if we had told them how much they were valued, they wouldn't be leaving. So I ran an experiment for about a year. Every Friday, I would write a short tribute to someone at my company describing the impact that person had made on me or the work that I had observed, a story about how I met that person or something funny that happened along the way, and just in general, how awesome, they are and what they've done. So here's an example. Nakota was our customer support manager. And as someone described, he does the work of 10,000 men. Nakota was consistently going above and beyond the call of duty to make our customers happy. He is awesome. Now, the drawing that I created for each person isn't something important. It's just something fun that I like to do. And what I said about each person usually wasn't all that earth-shattering either. The real magic was, and I want you to understand, the real magic is what everyone else said throughout the day. Story after story, encouragement, high fives. It was beautiful. All I did was simply start conversation. This experiment lasted for about a year, and I had so many people come up to me and thank me for this special way of being recognized, and how it was to be honored and recognized and celebrated by their peers. It made a big impact on how people felt about that work that they were doing. You see, every one of us wants to know that the things that we do matter, that our work has value and significance, that we have value. Encouragement highlights a person's strengths. It's positive reinforcement. What does that person want to do now that you've been encouraged? Well, they want to go do more of the awesome things that got them recognized in the first place. They want to keep feeling that feeling of making a difference. Now, if you know me, you know I can't go very long without talking about bacon. So I give you the highest award for excellence that I know. When you encourage someone or a team of people, they will continue to improve and create amazing results. And those people will go on to inspire others to do the same. And those people will go on to inspire even more. It's a chain reaction. I grew up in a dysfunctional family. There wasn't a whole lot of encouragement being shared. So encouragement doesn't come natural to me. And this is yet another skill that I've had to learn, and it's something that you can learn too. So let me show you. Imagine that you have a coworker named Mary. You can go up to Mary and say, Mary, I want you to know how much I appreciate all the database work that you do for our team. Not only that, but you are always smiling and being cheerful. You are such an encouragement to me and everyone around you. Thank you. Paul, thank you for always being willing to help. I know I can always count on you to help me when I'm stuck. It means a lot to me. You are awesome. Mark, thank you for always wearing deodorant and coming to work fully dressed. Keep up the good work, buddy. See, it's not that hard. If there's someone that you know who has impacted you in some way, either recently or in the past, let them know about it. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't you wish sometimes that you could just fast forward to the future, to that day when you have it all together and you have everything figured out, when you have all the skills mastered and you have it, you're the best version of you? Well, the reality is there's no shortcut to success. We get out of life in proportion to what we put into it. And I'm telling you these things about leadership, not so that you can go back to your workplace and point your finger at the things that your leaders are doing wrong or things that they could be in, or talk bad about them behind their backs. Well, if I was in charge, things would be different around here. I'm telling you these things so that you can take an honest look at yourself and start asking some important questions like, what changes can I make to become the most valuable employee that my company has ever seen? Or what changes can I help my team make to become the most valuable and productive team that my company has ever seen? If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. So said President Mutton Chops. None of those things require that you be a manager or have a fancy title. You can be a leader wherever you are. I got one more story I want to share with you. Thanksgiving 1982. As we did on most Thanksgivings, my brothers and sister got into the car with with my mom, and we drove to my aunt and uncle's house near Atlanta, Georgia. And we, had a big family get together and celebration. On this particular Thanksgiving Day, I discovered that my cousin had this thing called the TRS-80. And I don't know if I spent the entire time pecking at this computer and exploring it and learning, things about it, but I do know that I had a whole lot of fun playing on it. And I know that it must have made an impression on my uncle. Sometime after Thanksgiving, my mom got a call and we got back in the car and we drove back to my aunt and uncle's house, and waiting for me there was a big cardboard box that had, and inside this box was the TRS-80, a cassette drive, a floppy drive, a dot matrix printer, and a whole bunch of cables, and this book. This one kind and very generous act launched me on a journey of computers and programming and a love for technology. Even the illustrations in this book must have made an impact on me, as you can see by all the illustrations that I created for this talk. And if I ever write a book someday, you can bet that it's going to be full of fun illustrations. I continue to be inspired by my aunt and uncle. Their example of investing not only in their family, but in the lives of countless others. And I can't thank them enough for the impact that they made on my life and my career. You have an amazing opportunity to impact your family and your relatives and your community and your workplace. You never know if some act of kindness, a word of encouragement, or some small investment of your time could be the catalyst that launches a young person or a grown person on their lifelong journey of exploration and joy and their livelihood. So this is my challenge to you. Regardless of the technology that you know, regardless of your age, or years of experience, or lack of experience, regardless of the job title that you have an amazing opportunity to impact your workplace and your family and community and beyond in significant and positive and meaningful ways. Go maximize your talents. Go take ownership and responsibility. Go be courageous. Go inspire others. Share your experiences and go be awesome. Thank you.
Well, I'm sure everyone at home is giving you a standing ovation. It's really hard when you're doing this virtually to get the applause and feedback, but I will do it for you, sir.
Thank you.
I'm the only one with an open mic. So everyone out there in the internet, we lost a couple people right at the turn of the hour, so we still have a couple folks hanging on. If you have any questions for David, just feel free to put them in the chat. David, do you want to tell people how they can find you afterwards?
Sure. So as you saw in that last slide, my handle everywhere is Reverent Geek. So if you want to find me on the Twitters or GitHub or go to reverentgeek.com, you can find me just about anywhere on social media and otherwise at Reverent Geek. And Twitter, I'm a bit of a Twitteraholic, so you can definitely interact with me there.
Awesome. Where are you heading to next? What's your next show?
Music City. I'm going to Nashville end of next week, I think it is, to speak at what is now the trifecta: Music City, Agile, Music City Code, Music City Data, and it's all under this Music City Tech umbrella.
They do a fantastic job out there. So definitely anyone listening that is within earshot of Nashville, you should definitely be there. Gaines and his crew do a fantastic job.
Yep.
All right. Well, the questions aren't rolling in. And David, I don't want to take up more of your time than I already have. Again, thank you, Mr. David Neal, for joining us today. And thank you to everyone who's watching, whether or not it's live or it's in the future on YouTube. We do this every 2 weeks, so at least we try to.
Yep.
And as an attendee here, you automatically will get all the emails.
And I would love to hear other people's stories about how, struggles and things that they've had in their career. I think some of the best conversations I've had after I've started giving this talk at other events has been the conversations and people sharing with me some of their hard-won experiences.
Yes, sir. All righty. Well, we'll go and stop right there. Again, thank you, David, for joining us. And everyone else, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks again.